My biggest thing I think it was for like the 360 era and stuff like that, because
Like earlier?
SNES, yeah, SNES and 64, I probably couldn't remember a lot because it was mainly just a lot of like rare games and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until like the live arcade game became a really big thing, and you could get games for cheap and stuff like that. Like one of the most memorable ones that kind of changed my idea of indie games was Castle Crashers.
I remember playing it. It just I don't know why. Like I have a big old blank about it, but that was another game that I remember pretty fondly. Oh, that's kind of pretty interesting on that one. What was it? And I know how would I say it? Like there was a lot of bigger games around the time, and I think it wasn't until later on where I think indie games started being pretty big for me. I think when you bring up the 360 time and all that, I think back then still was pretty hard to know what an indie game was. I think indie games weren't really a broad kind of subject. Like the actual pocket of it was a broad subject. When someone made a video game, they were creating something that could potentially become bigger, right? Like it wasn't
Yeah,
something that small. And I think Minecraft is a very good example of that. A game that, that had a great concept. A lot of people jumped onto it before its version 1, and it just ended up something that just kind of was on everybody's computer at one point until like it started becoming so big. I think I look at games back then where it's like it didn't matter how small or big the idea was, everything kind of failed AAA to me back then.
yeah, that makes sense.
No, what's your opinion on that? I think it's for me. It's there was a transition, but I think for me the transition was a little bit more how I recognize the type of genre of it rather than like, oh, I knew this was an indie studio or anything like that.
For me, it was just like definitely like a shorter type of event, shorter type of game. Might be more of a 2D than a 3D aspect in its race. Especially like pixelated art becoming a thing back in the 360 era when everybody had switched to 3D models and stuff like that. It was like, okay, these games are like something different. You know what I mean? Because it's done with this type of art style, or like there's just something unique. Either it's a unique gameplay that's added to it, or the art style is something that's very unique that you don't usually see. Like pretty much when you see on TV for commercials stuff like that, like a Call of Duty, a Halo, you know what I mean, Last of Us stuff like that. It was like, okay, this game has like a niche that's gonna hopefully get my attention, and that's when I noticed like this is a totally different kind of area of games that I wasn't used to, in a sense of being like, oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a pretty good call out. Like this, the obvious difference in I don't want to say quality because I feel like when you say it like that, it kind of diminishes what was done for some indie games. I think it's just the fact that it just looked like it was scaled down a little bit. It's like, oh, this is nice artwork, or this is pixel art, all the way, or this is all the other stuff, like stuff that was like they did it before because they had to, and now everybody doing it for an aesthetic. I think that was a good way of kind of noticing them.
Gotcha.
I think for me though, I think it was just the fact that indie games dominated like the platform kind of market. That it was kind of like it was hard for me to see most platforming side-scrolling games that's not indie to a point
Really?
because it's like this you me and you grew up around Mario. We grew up with
Yeah.
like how Mario plays, and most Nintendo games back then had something like that where they might have added particular mechanic to it or something like that. But when you have games like Braid or whatever, that was like, oh yeah, it's different, but it tells a story in a very interesting way. It Yeah, the gameplay of it and kind of what you're realizing was kind of happening with the story was a very big deal. And it wasn't something that, oh, would this concept just sell to a general audience? It was something that I feel like was a little bit step above. And so after that, like when more and more side scrolling games came out, I always kind of just saw them as indie games because I think one of the ways that or reasons why is because most games, when people attempt their first game or attempt to kind of make their first game, normally goes to the platform of side scroller, if not a game that's kind of like a single screen, like Flappy Bird is kind of an example of that, where it's the game comps is really simple, it's really tight, there's not really anything to it, you're just trying to complete a level, versus that next level up will be a platformer kind of going, in some kind of direction right now. And I think that's kind of where I was kind of noticing, and I kind of fell into that trap too, because I know there are more indie games around that time. But I think the ones that kind of step out a little bit more, that even game companies or platformers and platforms, not platformers. See, I can't even get it out. Platforms were willing to push out were more like 2D and Rogue, really, because even for me, like Rogue type of 2D games still seem pretty platformish to me. But that's just kind of like my one-sided view of it. I've kind of grown a little bit since then and kind of looked at a lot of different stuff, but I kind of like where gaming is right now when it comes to indie games, because I think they add a lot more value than they even did when they were first becoming bigger.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of think indie games have taken over my like taste for video game stuff like that. Like I'd rather much play like a new indie game that has like a weird perk to it, something different than playing your usual AAA game. Just because for some reason it just scratches like an itch that feels good inside. Like I play this game, it's short, it's sweet. Like one of my favorite things I jumped into at the time was Greece, which I believe is like a French game and stuff like that, and it's about like going through the different stages of grief and stuff like that through death. But it's like very colorful. There's not very much like actual storytelling, a little bit of dialogue, and like the game itself just tells the entire story, and the colors change and everything, meaning different, like to have you get different feelings as you use this Sekiro to be like a small kind of platformer game. And I was like, that's really, really cool. And then another game that was for the 360 was, I had it in my head earlier too. A Hidden in Plain Sight, which was a multiplayer game that the idea was literally you're hidden in plain sight. So you'd be like the spy and a group of like NPCs, stuff like that, and then your friends could all jump on and play, and they would be part of it as well. And so one of them would be like a little aim dial on the screen, and you move it, and the other person is like a ninja hiding with a bunch of NPCs, and you're only when the little aim is moving, there's light on the screen that's like super bright, and the other side behind it is dark. And even though everyone's looking at the same TV screen, like you find out who you are, and you can start killing people. And as they move the little aim around, once it gets to where the person was killed, then they die. So like as long as you're in the darkness, you can kill, move away, and when the aim gets there, the people die, and that's when like the person who's trying to find out who's the killer, you're like, oh, okay, you just died right here, so you gotta see, okay, I think this person was moving this way or this way. And like that was a really, really cool thing. Like I've never played a game like this, and I've never done anything like that, and it was like a really, really cool, fun time. It was at least for a good 6 months to a year to be like every time the friends would come over and stuff like that, like, hey, dude, let's play this game. This is a good time. We're gonna have a good couple hours with this.
See, that's probably another question to ask.